All right. Hello, my beautiful IU, and welcome. So today we have two amazing guests. We have Dawndee and Laura, and I'll give you a brief introduction, and then I'll let them tell you more about themselves. Dawndee is a National Institute of Health Fellow, and she was actually trained by Jon Kabat-Zinn, who's most squarely responsible for bringing mindfulness to the United States many decades ago, and she can tell you a little bit more about that. And Laura is an occupational therapist, has been for many years, and worked with a variety of patients. So welcome, ladies. I'm very glad to have you with me.
Thank you for
Thank you.
having us.
So to get started, I thought it would be useful for the audience if we could talk a little bit about the origin of mindfulness, where it came from, how it came from Buddhist principles of meditation. And Dawndee, why don't you take that one, and why don't you tell the audience a little bit more about yourself, and then we can kind of get into that.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Dawndee Blickenstaff, and I originally got started as a neurosurgeon and moved into neuropsychiatry and psychology after a severe accident in 1990, left me in a wheelchair. And it turned me towards Eastern medicine because Western medicine wasn't being able to help me. And so I struck out on a journey moving from Western medicine into Eastern and holistic medicine. And as that, what I discovered was about how we handle stress. And it can sap our energy and undermine our health and even shorten our lives. And it makes us vulnerable to anxiety, depression, disconnection, and disease, thus not conducive to vital harmony, which we're striving for. And it's based on Jon Kabat-Zinn's renowned movement in mindfulness-based stress reduction program. And this classic program was a groundbreaking work which gave rise to a whole new field in medicine and psychology, and shows you how to use medically proven medical approaches derived from meditation and yoga to counteract stress and establish a greater balance of body and mind and stimulate well-being and healing. And by engaging in these mindfulness practices and integrating them into your life from moment to moment and from day to day, you can learn to live better with chronic pain, promote optimal healing, reduce anxiety and feelings of panic, and improve your overall quality of life, relationships, and social networks. And the groundbreaking book that Jon wrote was Full Catastrophe Living. And it was my first introduction into mindfulness in 1994. And a little bit about Jon and how he got started was Jon originally was here from the United States working on a doctorate, and went over and began studying with the Dalai Lama and became a Buddhist monk. And at the end of this process, he thought that was his life, dressing as a Buddhist, doing it. And then the Dalai Lama throws him a boomerang and says, nope, I'm sending you back to the United States. And I want you to bring Buddhism and mindfulness back to the United States and help heal the West. And Jon wasn't happy about that because he's like, well, they're not going to perceive me well dressed up as a Buddhist monk. And the Dalai Lama told him, don't go back as a Buddhist monk, go back as the way they will accept you until you introduce this philosophy to them. And so he did. And he is pretty much known as the father of mindfulness here in the United States, and got started back in 1977. And is at the University of Massachusetts Medical Center, and has an institute there that is recognized all over the world. And so with that, I want to turn to Laura and let her introduce herself a little bit, and then we'll get into talking about mindfulness and what it is for us and how we're approaching it in our healing.
Yeah, Laura, please.
Hi. This is new for me, I gotta say, so bear with me. My name's Laura. I've been an occupational therapist since 1989. And in my course of treating adults and children, I have learned, and also my personal experience with health issues. I got diagnosed with Crohn's disease In my attempts to get pregnant, every time I tried to get pregnant, I would have a miscarriage. And so I
Mm.
did turn to Western medicine, and Western medicine, like Dawndee, did fail me. And my primary physician at the time was a wonderful woman, and she kept asking me, "What are you doing to get yourself healthy?" And um, she was like the only person that really supported me, and she was a Western medicine doctor. Every other doctor that I went to um, basically told me that what I was saying was not true. Basically, I would say that their medical treatment, being drugs, was not helpful, and it was doing more
Mm-hmm.
damage than it was good. So that was one aspect of what turned me to mindfulness, is going in and realizing that there's a whole body mind connection, and that my thoughts and my feelings were a part of making me sick. And I think that's pretty true of
Yes.
any individual that does get sick. It's a holistic approach to healing yourself. So that was one part of it. My personal experience, and then there's the whole work experience that really enforced what in my field of practice, that I tried to give that to the patients that I saw. um in play with children, it's easier because they're less culturally trained.
Mm-hmm.
um with adults, a little bit harder, but a lot more baggage. We all
Right.
as adults, I think, gain a lot of baggage, a lot of experiences, good experiences, not so good experiences, that shape us to who we are in our thought process. um I will turn it over to Marc.
That's good. I appreciate you sharing that, Laura. Mindfulness shows up differently in different cultures, but it's really interesting to me, having been a student of a lot of different indigenous cultures and ancient cultures over the years, that they all have the concept. They all have the same idea of living in the now and being an observer of some kind and practicing neutrality and non-reaction. Just
Correct.
observing the events that are happening and kind of dropping or not allowing the emotional context to stick to you
Or
and
to assign
staying
judgment.
right. So in Andean cosmology, which is what I'm trained in, I want to see if I can do this quickly here. I'm trying to switch my camera, so bear with me. Doesn't look like it's going to happen. Oh, that's fine. I was gonna show you my mesa, because it's kind of like a portable altar in a way, an altar, where the Pacos take this mesa with them, and it kind of gives them an anchor or a grounding. It'd be very similar to like Buddhist prayer beads or rosary beads for Christians, Catholics. It keeps them grounded in the now, and
Mm-hmm.
it keeps them in the mode of being an observer.
Right.
And they say that if you're worried about the past or the future, then you're introducing suffering into your own life, right? If you're not in the
Right.
now. I think that's very Buddhist, right? Very
Yes.
mindful. But this is
Yes.
coming from an ancient culture in South America. So it just goes to show you that, I in my own judgment, my discernment, when you learn something that exists universally, it's probably true.
Yeah. Yep. Well,
So
I think
Don,
what's really, go ahead.
go ahead. I was
I
just
think
going to
what's
say, why don't you talk a little bit more about how mindfulness shows up in our daily life, and maybe a little bit about what your practice is.
okay. So how I look at, I love the name of John's book, Full Catastrophe Living, because that's what it's about. This beautiful catastrophe that's our life. And we can either live it in a way that isn't vibrant and rich and full, or it can be a complete catastrophe and we pull within and aren't out in our lives. And so what Jon's whole thing was about, using the wisdom of your body and mind to face stress, pain, and illness. And he instituted the mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR programs, originally at the University of Massachusetts, and now they're almost at every single hospital in the United States and all over the world. And this has been since 1977. And I met him in 1994, and he taught me and completely changed my life. And then recommended me to the National Institute of Health to be the consultant for them at MD Anderson Cancer Center at the University of Texas in Massachusetts. And as you can imagine, this is the #1 cancer hospital in the world, and people come from all over there in all kinds of circumstances, and their life is a catastrophe to them. And the goal there is to teach them that even though they're in this catastrophe, that it can be beautiful and it can be rich, and that what they're going through is temporary, and that they can suspend judgment on it, but be present with it. And I think that's what mindfulness is about, is being able to suspend judgment and just be present with something and sit with it. And whether that's uncomfortable or comfortable. So I was very honored to be part of this 7-year research study, and I focused specifically on working with people who had lung cancer and who could not stop. And so we were developing MindBat, which was mindfulness-based addiction therapy, and getting people who had tried all their lives to stop smoking and had lung cancer and were going to die if they didn't do it. So it was critical. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Marc.
Yeah, I'm interested, Laura, in how mindfulness or the practice shows up in what you do, either with yourself or with your patients.
Well, that's an interesting question. For me, I think it is getting individuals to see that they have more in their cup than not.
Oh, very good.
And I think a lot of times we don't necessarily see the full picture. We focus on, for instance, give you an example. If you break your toe, you're going to focus on the broken toe. You're not going to focus on the whole body. Or if you have a broken arm, or for some reason, we as a species forget about all the good and focus on the negative.
Yes.
And not seeing the full picture leads us down a road of feeling helpless, anxiety, depression. And yeah, your life could have, I mean, this is a simple example, broken toe, but there could be a lot of things happening in your life all at once. And I think that's really what when the stress builds up, I think it's a lot harder to be mindful. So the more stress you have in your life, I think the harder it is to be mindful. And you need tools in your handbag, your basket.
Right.
You need tools. You need tools. You need support, whether that be friends or family. So community is part of that.
Right.
I don't think we're meant to be able to do this by ourselves. It's just too
Beautiful.
hard.
It is.
But you have to do the internal work first for yourself to be receptive to other people coming to help. Because if you're not in that space where you are accepting of others helping, you're going to reject them. And so it's putting down your guard. And you mentioned vulnerability before, Dawndee, and yes, it's all about being vulnerable and trust. But if you've had a lot of bad experiences in your life,
Right.
it's really hard to trust. And
Right.
in the moment, if you're experiencing bad experiences, whether it be with your job, your spouse, your family, your friends, that makes it harder to stay mindful and focused.
Right. Because we have a,
and you
go ahead.
you will try to revert back to
Mhm.
old patterns out of fear, out of anxiety, out of, the triggers that trigger whatever, to those habits that weren't productive or weren't positive.
Wow, that was beautifully said. I think that what
Yeah, thank you
what
for
we
that.
do is what we do is we look at things and we assign a judgment instantly, as opposed to just holding back. And as a society, Americans are instant gratification. That's one of the reasons why drug addiction was so easy, because people want the instant fix. With mindfulness, there is not an instant fix. With mindfulness, it's about focusing on your breath, taking a breath, suspending judgment, and just observing the situation and not assigning it judgment. And so I'm going to give you an example of that. Let's say you're downtown, you're running errands at lunchtime, and you're on the street, you're getting yourself a Starbucks, right? And you see your girlfriend across the street coming out of the bank. And you guys connect eye to eye and you're best buddies. I mean, this is how it is. And you look at him and you wave, and your buddy looks straight at you and turns and walks away. Well, you can have a few reactions here. You can go, oh, shoot, what did I do? She must be pissed off at me. She doesn't want to talk to me. Or you could go, oh, she really didn't see me, and so that's what's going on. Or you could say, you could look at it and go, I wonder what's going on with her that she wasn't able to see me. And you find out later that this friend just found out that someone in their family had died and was coming out of the bank to go find their car, and they were just in shock. But instead, you could have run with it and gone, they don't like me, these are the things about me, and you get into this negative drag. And so what mindfulness about is about taking a breath, and when you get into these reactive moments, to all of a sudden take in a deep breath through your nose to 4 counts, blow it out to 4 counts, and just let it be and sit with it and not react. And that's really hard to do sometimes, especially when, like you said, Laura, you've come from a background very similar to mine, where I was abused, et cetera. And so you're reactive, you have set reactions. And mindfulness is about changing those reactions to be open, loving, and healing to you, instead of this, what I call a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, and I appreciate both of your perspectives. I think they're really important practical examples and approaches to mindfulness. And one of the things I want to call out that was common to both of you that I think is often overlooked is we live in this culture of in my terminology, it's the toxic masculine, meaning we have to err on the side of always doing something.
Correct.
Right? We get a stimulus, we have to do something. And this is the opposite of that. This is the divine feminine, or the balanced feminine reaction, which is allow, embody, nurture, don't judge, no matter what, right? And I think if we get into the mode of engaging our observer, like Eckhart Tolle talks about, and I've done previous live streams on, we get to where it's almost like we're bifurcating our awareness in a way, because there's the us that is seeing the person across the street ignore us, but then there's also the us that's just as valid, that's watching the whole thing happen and can decide not to react. So when you're getting back to what Laura said, when you're constantly bombarded by negative input, whether that's from chronic pain or an injury or a bad family situation or whatever it is, one of the hardest things to do, but I think probably one of the most foundational things to do, is to first decide not to react. Before you do anything else, decide, oh, I'm not going to die right now in this moment. unless I do something, I can choose not to react. Then everything else comes. Then you open up space to have other choices, right? Then you can start employing the techniques of mindfulness, or you can start doing other things that you're learning to kind of introduce that space. But I think the first decision is the decision not to react. How do you
Yeah,
guys feel?
I would
I'd
agree
agree.
with that, Mark. Yeah.
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 And there's something that I love that Jon says. It struck me when I heard him, because I spent a week, my first interaction with him was with another 100 doctors from all over the world. And we were all in this retreat and learning about mindfulness. And I remember what he said to me, and he's got the calmest energy of anybody I've ever been around. And most of you who know me, I'm a little bit hyper. And so for me, mindfulness really helped center me down. And I love how Jon starts is he goes, mindfulness is about having a beginner's mind. We're adults. So we have these preconceived notions, these thoughts about who we are in the world, who other people are in the world. And what he gets you to do, or teaches us to do, and then we go out and teach others, is to have this beginner's mind and to have the attitude that will be particularly important when we engage in formal meditation practices. And you're able to step back and really appreciate things like the ocean and a sunset. How many times have you been with someone out in nature, this beautiful sunset, and the whole time they're talking? But look at the sunset, it's so beautiful, blah, 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 blah. Okay. And I have to say, I would have been one of those people, instead of stepping back and just being present with it, taking a breath and breathing it in and breathing it out, the experience, and not assigning a judgment, but just being able to have this beginner's mind of trust and open your heart to what the possibilities are in that moment, and being able to see the beauty in each moment in each day. And what Jon says, I thought was really great, is that he says to people, okay, so you have this beginner's mind, but it's conducive to healing, but we have to learn how to have the beginner's mind. So in other words, look at the world like a 5-year-old does when they go to kindergarten, where the world is full of wonder, and begin to open your heart to trust, to be able to learn to not have to achieve or do or have a judgment about it. And what he calls it is a non-striving, that we are learning to not have to strive to have an outcome. There doesn't have to be a set outcome. And then when we experience something, to just accept it as where it's at and sit with it for a while. You can go, down 30 minutes later, have a judgment about it, but this is all about in the moment, in the breath, because the reality is the only thing that we are guaranteed is the breath in our lungs. None of us knows that we're going to live for another 30 years. So what Jon helps you to see, or other mindfulness teachers, is that since this is the only moment you have, make it the most, make it the fullest, make it beautiful, even if it's incredibly painful.
Yeah, very well put.
Can I just interject a little bit? Okay. So a couple of tools in my basket, and they're not to be anybody else's tools, but when I first started becoming more and more mindful, I started practicing yoga. And my partner at the time told me, oh my gosh, whatever you're doing in that yoga class, keep doing it, because I was very reactive. I was that person that was very reactive. I got to say, most of my life, I have not been judgmental, but I was reactive. I was reactive because I thought, and this still comes out in me when I'm stressed out. I tend to think everybody is attacking me.
Okay.
Yeah. So my tools are yoga, which is excellent, and hiking. And so hiking gives me that opportunity to do what you were talking about, Dawndee.
Right.
I don't hike necessarily and speed hike to get through the hiking. I hike to hike for the experience. The
Yes,
bonus is it's good for you physically,
right,
but I do it for a mindful experience because
right.
that's what gives me joy. So if
Mhm.
you can find an activity that gives you joy, whether it be dancing in your kitchen and listening to music, or going for a bike ride with your kids, something that gives you um, in the moment joy, that is just such a gift.
Right.
Yeah, such a gift.
The thing that you'll really get once you get into mindfulness, and what most people don't realize, is that yoga is a form of meditation. And
Absolutely.
so absolutely, and we call it mindful yoga. And there's 7 foundational attitudes to the elements of mindfulness practice, and these are the qualities of the mind and heart that also contributed to broadening as well as deepening the embodiment of mindfulness in our lives. So these include cultivating attitudes of non-harming, generosity, gratitude, forbearance, forgiveness, kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity. And in many ways, these are not separate from the 7 attitudinal elements that we've previously discussed, but it's about the challenge of the circumstances. And I'll give you a prime example. Many of you might not know this, but Mark and I have several nonprofits, and one of the nonprofits is called Tribal Motion, and I'm a medical doctor. And so what Tribal Motion is about is we call ourselves worldwide wellness warriors, because what we do is we go to conflict, war zones, and national disaster areas in the United States and abroad and work for free, where Doctors Without Borders or the UN won't go in. And so obviously we're going into extremely dangerous circumstances. The chance of not coming back is usually 50%. And if that isn't a time when mindfulness comes into play, I don't know when it would. Because for me, I'm usually the head that goes in and runs this, and I have to have a beginner's mind. I have to go into these situations and not have a preconceived judgment of the people there, or even the people whom we're afraid of there, because we haven't lived their lives. We don't know why they're reacting the way they do. And so by us going there and practicing mindfulness in front of them, we can change the attitude of a people, not just ourselves. And so for me, if I wouldn't have learned mindfulness, I could have never done that work. And we would begin each day with hours of meditation, and at lunch get together and meditate. And it was like our breath, literally like the oxygen that kept us going, because the sense of overwhelm, the sense of attack on your body and mind is overwhelming. But mindfulness allowed us to see the beauty even in these crazy, dangerous moments.
And when you think about it, a lot of people that are in crisis feel like they're living in a war zone, right? So
Absolutely.
what you just
Agreed.
said,
Agreed.
they don't actually have to be physically in a war zone to feel like that's their life, that it's just they're under constant assault and they can't catch a breath, they can't have a moment to themselves. And so how do they do this? How do they heal? And I think this is a pathway to that, because we all know, those of us who are in this work or have done this work with others, we all know that the key to this is perception, your own perception. And if you can
Yeah,
start to shift that, it starts
Yeah.
to, what I believe is, it starts to shift you energetically. The frequency of the energy that you're experiencing in the world will heighten, will raise, and
absolutely.
everything around you will begin to change. We see that happen all the time. And unfortunately, most of the examples that we have out in the world of people doing this are negative, in the media, in social media and mainstream media, all these different sources of people telling us about doom and gloom. And a lot of people are kind of just locked in to the message and just going on rails like a train, like, oh, okay, that's reality. I need to take that on. They don't realize they have a choice. And so introducing the choice and introducing the responsibility and accountability in a good way to the person to let them know that you have a choice about what you perceive. You don't have a choice about the stimulus, whatever it is, but you do have a choice about how you react to it. Everything is a choice. And you have a choice about how you perceive it.
Right.
And the more that you can embody those 7 principles, everything will not only change for you, it will change with everyone around you. Like ripples in a pond when you toss a rock in a pond. It's the same thing. We can look to nature for examples of this, right?
Right.
And this is also the other thing that occurred to me while you were talking was this is how nature works. This is how our ecosystems work. And we know this because we've seen collapsing ecosystems and repaired ecosystems where think of one example where all of the wolves in an area in Michigan were eliminated by hunters, and then they just died off, and the entire ecosystem was collapsing. So all of the deer were dying or leaving the area. It got all the way down to insects. Everything was collapsing in the ecosystem because that linchpin species was gone. And so 20 years ago, when they started reintroducing healthy packs, now they've got a thriving wolf population, and guess what? The ecosystem is thriving. And my point is, think about this on an individual level. If you are able to shift your perception and create that moment of stillness so that you can make a choice instead of just reacting, that's everything, because it affects everything.
Well, and I think part of what affects us also is that in especially our society, we have this sense of instantaneous gratification. And technology can be wonderful, but it can also be the most unmindful thing that is out there. Because in the process, you can bring mindfulness into your life, but it's really hard when you so much of your time, you might want to check your email or your text messages or post a tweet. You might become aware of how addictive we can be to our devices and to the 24/7 connectivity that has us always available and immediately responsive to everybody else except for ourselves, and clutching onto our phones as if they were oxygen line to life itself. And in the process, perhaps losing touch more and more with ourselves and with our individual moments that are precious. One moment can carry you through great strife in your life or difficult circumstances. So ironically, some of the most important connections of all, namely with our own deepness analog self, with our body and with our present moment experience, can be seriously eclipsed by this. And so I would encourage everybody to have a technology timeout every day where you just do not have your phone by you, where you do not check messages and you just don't respond, and that you spend that time without that instant connection and just being present with yourself and your breath.
Yeah, very good point. And I do this as a practice too, just to illustrate it, where it's no screen time an hour before I go to sleep. And I don't even sleep with my phone in the same room.
Yeah, and you used to, so that really
Yeah.
changed for you.
It's really, it's completely across the house, and I have it on do not disturb on a timer. So it goes off at, I think, at 11 p.m. So if somebody texts me, I don't even know. It's just off. So that is, a decision to create space. And every once in a great while, somebody will try to text me, or there's, some crisis, but, day to day living and waiting for a crisis and leaving it on, that's a choice too.
Exactly. Marc, I was wondering if maybe we can, for those of who are joining us who don't know about mindfulness, I could do a little brief exercise as an introduction, and then in our future ones, our future live streams, will actually teach mindfulness and then have programs off from that where people can come and learn mindfulness with me or you. So I want to ask everybody to assume a comfortable posture, lying on your back or just sitting. And if you're sitting, as best you can sit in a posture that embodies dignity. So upright, proud, keeping the spine straight and letting your shoulders drop. Now, allow your eyes to close. And if it feels comfortable to you, allow your attention to gently align on your belly, as if you were coming upon a shy animal sunning itself on a tree stump in a clearing in the forest. Feel your belly rise or expand gently on the in-breath, and fall or recede on the out-breath. And as best you can, maintain the focus on the various sensations associated with breathing, being with each in-breath for its full duration, and being with each out-breath for its full duration. And if you were riding the waves of your own breath, every time you notice that your mind has wandered off the breath, notice what it was that carried you away. And then gently just bring your attention back to your belly and to the sensations associated with the breath coming in and out, the breath going out. If your mind wanders away from the breath 1,000 times, then your job is simply to notice what it is on your mind at the moment that you come to realize that it is no longer on your breathing. And then to begin to bring your attention back to the breath each and every time, no matter what it becomes preoccupied with, as best you can, continually rest in the awareness of the feeling of the breath moving in and out of your body, or coming back to it over and over again. Practice this exercise for 15 minutes at a convenient time every day, whether you feel like it or not, for 1 week, and see how it feels to incorporate a discipline of meditation practice in your life. Be aware of how it feels to spend some time, quality time with yourself each day, just being with your breath without having to do anything else. And that's the end of the exercise.
That was wonderful. I was getting ready to, I mean, I was really relaxed.
Yeah, I'm glad.
Very relaxed. Yeah,
I
felt
can
good.
tell you from my perspective that I was blocked about doing medication. Meditation. Well, that too, medication too. Yeah, I was blocked about doing meditation for years. And when I finally was able to start doing it, it was because I took all the pressure off myself of doing it right.
Right.
I just started doing it for 5 minutes, then 10 minutes, then 15. And like you say, start noticing the things that were taking me out of my connection to the breath, and then returning.
Yeah.
Well,
Marc,
and
it's
another,
interesting that you said that was kind of almost like a Freudian slip, because you
right.
used medication in
Yeah,
Thank you.
so
Beautiful.
meditation is medication.
it
Thank
is.
It
you.
is so calming, and it just I don't it releases endorphins, and it takes you to the brain waves that are healing. So
Yes.
it's interesting that you said that, because it's so true.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah,
You know,
and the other aspect of that, I think that's the positive. The dark side of it is there's many medications that make it very difficult to
yes.
meditate.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
as you start to do this, you might find that your dependence or reliance on certain medications decreases because you're
Yes.
able to control. Well, control's not the right word. You're able to become in tuned
Yes.
to your
In
own feelings
flow. Yep.
in flow, right? You're able to
And
go
balance.
into a flow state with your own emotions and your own reactions. And that's what do people take SSRIs and other medications for? That's
Yeah.
exactly what they take them for, right?
Absolutely.
Well,
Um,
when you're,
Yeah.
I want you to think about this when in this next week while you're practicing this. I'd like you all to tune into your breath and your breathing at different times of the day, not necessarily the same time. Do an experiment with yourself, feeling the belly go through 1 or 2 risings and fallings. So in with the breath to 4, out with the breath. And I always recommend to people to go breathe in through the nose, blow out through your mouth. And as you're blowing out through your mouth, imagine the air coming up in through your nose, going down in through the lungs, and then coming back out. And then as you blow, that you're literally blowing the anxiety, the pain out through the bottom of your feet. And that you're bringing in through your nose as you breathe through the top of your head, the spiritual breath that comes down and through and cleanses you. Be aware of your thoughts and emotions in these moments, just observing them with kindness. Be gentle with yourself without judging them or you. At the same time, be aware of any changes in the way you are seeing things and feeling about yourself. Ask yourself and look deeply into whether your awareness of an emotion or thought that arises is actually caught in the feeling of the emotion or in the content of the thought. It's the thought that we get caught up on. And what we need to do is be aware and just sit present with the emotion, whether it's good, bad, whatever. We don't have to have a reaction to it or a judgment of it, even being good, bad, or other. It's just a reaction. And so practice this in this next week. And I also encourage people when they do this to go into a room where they're by themselves, so that I can pretty much meditate anywhere in any space now, but it's a practice. It's a learning how to live. So when you first do it, it's usually very good to be in a room by yourself where the TV, radio, nothing is on, and you're just focusing on your breath. And if you can do this in the next week, I'd really love to hear from people next week as to how this has affected their thinking, their reactions, how their body feels, and bring that back to group next week and share it with us with any questions or.
Put your experience in the chat in the Shaman Circle for this event. It's open now. It'll stay open, and I encourage you to interact. And if you need more resources, we can provide those links to different things, or provide us with commentary about your experience or questions you have for any of us. You're welcome to do that. That's what the Shaman Circle is about. That's what the group's about, is to share your experiences and get support.
Right.
So with that, I want to wrap things up. We could be here and talk about this all day. It's something that we're passionate about and that we practice. So I thank you all for coming and lending us your attention and your energy. And I also encourage you to direct message any of us if you want to talk to us one-on-one. That's also totally fine. And with that, I'm going to thank Laura Jones and Dawndee Blickenstaff for being with us on this week's live stream. And you might see them again at some point. So thank you, ladies.
Thank you for inviting
Thank
us,
you
Mark.
so
We
much.
really appreciate it. It was such an honor.
Yeah.
Namaste.
Thank you, Mark. Namaste.
Thank you.